The rain fell cold and hard on Alara's shoulders as she walked home through the empty streets. Her feet ached from scrubbing floors all day, and her stomach growled with hunger. In her worn pocket, she clutched $23, her last money until next week. It was barely enough for rent, maybe a pack of noodles if she was lucky. She passed a warm cafe where people sat laughing and eating. The smell of fresh bread made her dizzy, but she kept walking. She had learned long ago that wanting things you couldn't have only made the hunger worse. Under a flickering streetlight near the bus stop, something made her pause. A small figure sat huddled against the wall, shaking in the cold rain. It was a boy, no older than 7, wearing only a thin jacket. His lips were blue, and his eyes stared at nothing. Alara's heart twisted. She knew that look. She had worn it herself many times, the look of someone the world had forgotten. Without thinking, she turned around and walked back toward the convenience store, her last dollars heavy in her hand. Inside the store, Alara moved quickly. She grabbed a cup of hot soup, a bottle of water, and the thickest blanket she could find. The cashier counted her money twice, and she watched her last hope disappear into the register. Outside, she knelt beside the boy and wrapped the warm blanket around his thin shoulders. His whole body was shaking. She opened the soup carefully and held it out to him. For a long moment, he just stared at her with wide, frightened eyes. "It's okay," she whispered softly. "You're safe now. Eat slowly." His small hands reached out and took the cup. He drank carefully, and color slowly returned to his pale cheeks. Alara sat beside him on the cold ground, sharing the only warmth she had to give. Minutes passed in silence. The rain continued to fall around them, but under that bus stop, they created a small island of comfort in a cruel world. Then, bright headlights cut through the darkness. A long black car pulled up directly in front of them and stopped. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, holding a black umbrella. He was tall and walked with quiet authority. Behind him, 2 more men in dark clothes emerged from the vehicle. "Thank you for staying with him," the suited man said, his voice calm and professional. He handed Alara a crisp white business card with only a phone number printed on it. "My name is Julian. I work for Mr. Maxwell Sterling. He is very grateful for what you did tonight." Alara looked confused. "I don't understand. Who is Mr. Sterling?" Julian gestured toward the car. "The boy's father. He has a proposition for you, miss. He would like to meet you tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock sharp." He pointed to an address written on the back of the card. "Don't be late." Before Alara could ask any questions, Julian gently lifted the boy and carried him to the car. The child looked back at her once, his eyes still frightened but no longer empty. The car drove away into the night, leaving Alara standing alone in the rain, holding a business card that would change her life forever. The next morning, a black car arrived at Alara's tiny apartment exactly at 8. The driver said nothing, just opened the door and waited. Alara climbed inside, her heart pounding with nervousness. They drove for nearly an hour, leaving the crowded city behind. Finally, they turned through massive iron gates and up a long driveway. Alara's breath caught in her throat. The Sterling mansion rose before her like something from a dream. It was all glass and white stone, cold and beautiful like a museum. Fountains sparkled in the morning sun, and perfectly trimmed gardens stretched in every direction. Inside, everything was marble and silence. Her worn shoes squeaked on the polished floor, making her feel small and out of place. A stern woman in a gray uniform told her to wait in the entrance hall. Alara sat on the edge of a white leather chair, afraid to touch anything. Minutes crawled by like hours. The house was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Somewhere, she was certain, someone was watching her. She could feel invisible eyes judging everything about her, from her cheap clothes to the way she nervously touched her mother's old locket around her neck. Sharp footsteps echoed across the marble floor. A woman approached, her heels clicking like a judge's gavel. She was beautiful in a cold way, with perfect makeup and a tailored black dress that probably cost more than Alara made in a year. "So you're the Good Samaritan everyone is talking about," the woman said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She looked Alara up and down like she was inspecting a stain on expensive fabric. "I'm Isabella, Mr. Sterling's executive assistant." Alara stood and offered her hand politely. Isabella glanced at it but didn't shake it. "A word of advice," Isabella whispered, leaning close. "Mr. Sterling's gratitude fades quickly. Whatever he offers you today, don't let it go to your head. Girls like you come and go in this house like the cleaning staff. You're nothing special." Before Alara could respond, Isabella turned and walked toward a long hallway. "Follow me. And try not to touch anything. Everything here costs more than you'll ever be worth." Alara felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she kept her head high and followed silently. She had survived worse than cruel words. Isabella led her to an enormous library that stretched 2 stories high. Books were piled everywhere in complete chaos, some stacked on tables, others scattered across the floor. It looked like a hurricane had torn through the room. "This is your first task," Isabella announced with a satisfied smile. "Mr. Sterling requires his entire collection catalogued by theme and author. Alphabetically. By tomorrow morning." Alara's eyes widened. There had to be thousands of books here. It was impossible. "Of course, if you can't handle it, I understand," Isabella said sweetly. "Not everyone is cut out for this kind of work. I can call you a car right now if you'd like to go home." Alara looked at the mountain of work before her. Then she thought of the $23 she had spent last night, money she desperately needed. She thought of the boy's frightened eyes and his father's mysterious offer. "I'll do it," she said quietly. Isabella's smile faltered slightly. "We'll see." She turned and left, closing the heavy doors behind her. Alone, Alara took a deep breath and picked up the first book. She had always loved reading. Perhaps that love would save her now. All through the night, Alara worked without stopping. Her back ached and her eyes burned, but she kept going. She discovered that beneath the chaos, there was a pattern. The books had once been organized but had been deliberately scattered. Someone had made this mess on purpose. Someone wanted her to fail. By dawn, she had created a beautiful system. History books lined one wall, literature another. Poetry filled the lower shelves where light from the window would touch them first. Everything was alphabetical and perfect. As the sun rose, Isabella returned with a cup of black coffee in her hand. Her face fell when she saw the immaculate library. She walked through the aisles, desperately looking for mistakes, but found none. Then, standing near Alara, Isabella suddenly stumbled. The full cup of coffee flew from her hand and splashed across a priceless white Persian rug beneath an antique reading table. "Look what you made me do!" Isabella shrieked, pointing at Alara. "You bumped into me. That rug is worth $50,000. Mr. Sterling will have you arrested." Alara said nothing. She simply walked to a cleaning closet she had noticed during the night, grabbed supplies, and knelt beside the stain. Her hands moved with practiced skill, blotting and treating the coffee before it could set. Isabella stood above her, calling security on her phone, demanding Alara be removed immediately. But Alara worked calmly, her quiet dignity more powerful than any words. Behind a bookshelf, hidden from view, a small security camera recorded everything. In his office 3 floors above, Maxwell Sterling watched the scene on his computer screen. He rewound it twice, watching Isabella deliberately throw the coffee, then watching this poor maid take the blame without defending herself. He picked up his phone. "Julian, bring the young woman to my office. Now. And tell Isabella her services will no longer be required." Minutes later, Alara was escorted into the most intimidating room she had ever seen. Behind a massive black desk sat a man with steel-gray hair and eyes like frozen water. He gestured to a chair. "Sit. Tell me about yourself, Alara." His voice was cold but not unkind. "Why did you help my son last night?" Elara chose her words carefully. Because he was alone. Nobody should be alone like that, especially a child. Maxwell Sterling studied her face for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, just slightly. What if I told you Leo wasn't really lost? What if I told you my security team was watching him the entire time? Elara's eyes widened in confusion and hurt. You used him? Your own son? To test people? Not people, Sterling said quietly. You. Specifically you. He turned his computer screen around. It showed security footage of that rainy street corner, but from high above. We've been conducting this test for 3 months. Hundreds of people walked past Leo. Some looked. Most didn't. Only one person stopped. Only one person gave away her last money to help a stranger's child. He stood and walked to the window. My son hasn't spoken in 6 months, not since his mother died. He doesn't trust anyone anymore. But last night, in the car, he whispered one word. Your name. Elara. Sterling turned to face her. I need someone real. Someone who can't be bought. I'm offering you a position as Leo's personal companion. The salary is $200,000 a year, plus a private suite in this house. Do you accept? Elara's new room was bigger than her entire old apartment. She had her own bathroom with hot water that never ran out, a bed so soft she was afraid to sleep in it, and windows that overlooked gardens she had only seen in magazines. But all of that faded away the moment she met Leo officially. He was waiting in the mansion's greenhouse, a beautiful glass room filled with plants and warm sunlight. When he saw her, his serious little face brightened just a fraction. For days, they spent hours together in comfortable silence. Elara didn't push him to talk. Instead, she showed him how to plant seeds, told him quiet stories, and simply sat with him when he needed someone near. Slowly, like a flower opening to the sun, Leo began to trust her. He showed her his secret hiding spots, shared his favorite books, and even laughed once when she accidentally got dirt on her nose while repotting a fern. One afternoon, while they worked together planting tomatoes, Leo's small hand reached out and gently touched the silver locket Elara always wore around her neck. His fingers traced its worn surface with sudden intense curiosity. It was my mother's, Elara explained softly, opening the locket to show him. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman with kind eyes and Elara's same smile. I never knew her. She left me at an orphanage when I was a baby. This locket is the only thing I have from her. Leo stared at the photograph for a long moment. Then his eyes went wide with recognition. Without a word, he grabbed Elara's hand and pulled her toward the house, moving with sudden urgency. They ran through hallways until they reached the newly organized library. Leo released her hand and rushed to a bottom shelf, pulling out a heavy leather album. His small fingers flipped through pages frantically until he found what he was looking for. He pointed, his hand shaking slightly. Elara looked down at the photograph. Her heart stopped. The woman in the picture wore the same locket, the exact same one. But that wasn't what made Elara's world spin. The woman had her face. Her eyes. Her smile. It was like looking into a mirror that showed the past. Who is this? Elara whispered. Leo, who is this woman? Leo couldn't answer, but he didn't need to. Maxwell Sterling appeared in the library doorway, drawn by the commotion. When he saw the album open in Leo's hands, his face went pale as death. Where did you get that? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Then his eyes fell on the locket around Elara's neck. He stumbled backward as if struck. Elara held out the locket with trembling hands. Sterling took it carefully, like it might shatter. He turned it over, examining every detail, then pressed a spot on the side she had never known existed. A tiny hidden compartment sprang open. Inside, engraved in letters so small they were nearly invisible, were 2 letters, A.S., always. Amelia Sterling, he breathed. This was my sister's locket. I gave it to her on her 18th birthday. He looked up at Alara with eyes full of impossible hope. She disappeared 20 years ago. We searched everywhere but never found her. Tell me, child. What was your mother's name? I don't know, Alara said, tears streaming down her face. The orphanage only told me she left me there when I was 3 days old. They said she was sick. That's all I know. Sterling's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. We need a DNA test. Today. The results came back 36 hours later. Maxwell Sterling called Alara to his office, and this time Leo came too, holding her hand tightly. The family lawyer, Arthur Graves, was also present, standing near the window with his hands clasped behind his back. Sterling's voice was thick with emotion as he read from the document. According to the DNA analysis, there is a 99.9% probability that Alara and I share a direct familial relationship. She is my niece. My sister's daughter. The room went silent. Then Arthur Graves stepped forward, his face beaming with what looked like genuine joy. He was an older man with kind eyes and silver hair, someone who had been with the Sterling family for decades. My dear girl, he said warmly, taking Alara's hands in his. Welcome home. Your mother was a beautiful soul. She would be so proud of the woman you've become. He turned to Sterling. This is a miracle, Maxwell. After all these years, Amelia's daughter has found her way back to us. Sterling nodded, unable to speak. Leo squeezed Alara's hand tighter, a small smile on his usually serious face. But as they celebrated, none of them noticed the way Arthur Graves' smile didn't quite reach his eyes. News of Alara's true identity spread through the Sterling household like wildfire. Servants whispered in hallways. Staff members who had ignored her before now bowed respectfully. Everything had changed in an instant. Isabella took the news worst of all. She cornered Alara in a quiet corridor, her beautiful face twisted with rage. You think you've won? She hissed. You think finding out you're rich changes anything? You're still nothing but a lucky orphan playing dress-up. Alara tried to walk past her, but Isabella grabbed her arm hard. This family has a way of losing people, Alara. Just ask your mother. Oh wait, you can't. She disappeared, remember? These things have a way of repeating themselves. The threat was unmistakable. Alara pulled her arm free. Is that a warning or a confession, Isabella? Isabella's eyes went cold. Neither. It's a promise. She leaned close and whispered, accidents happen every day in houses this big. Especially to people who don't belong. That night, Alara barely slept. She kept thinking about her mother, about what could have made her disappear 20 years ago. She thought about Isabella's words and the strange way Arthur Graves had looked at her when he thought no one was watching. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't name what. 3 days later, Alara woke to find her face on the front page of every tabloid in the city. The headlines screamed lies, con artist tricks grieving billionaire. Fake heir exposed, DNA results questioned. The stories were full of personal details no stranger should know. Someone inside the house had betrayed her. Someone had sold her story to destroy her reputation before it could even begin. Maxwell Sterling was furious. He wanted to sue every newspaper, but Alara had a different idea. Let me do an interview, she said. Let me tell the truth myself. Sterling was hesitant, but Arthur Graves surprisingly agreed. The girl is right. Silence looks like guilt. Let her speak. 2 nights later, Alara sat across from the city's toughest television interviewer in front of millions of viewers. The woman asked harsh questions, attacking her story from every angle. But Alara didn't get defensive. She simply told the truth. She spoke about loneliness, about what it means to help someone not because you'll get something back, but because it's right. She talked about her mother, about the family she never knew she had, and about Leo, who had taught her that trust was the most precious gift anyone could give. By the end, even the interviewer had tears in her eyes. The interview changed everything. Public opinion swung dramatically in Alara's favor. Letters of support poured into the Sterling estate by the thousands. People called her an inspiration, proof that kindness still mattered in a cruel world. But in a dark office across the city, someone watched the interview with growing rage. Arthur Graves sat alone, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand, and watched Alara's honest face fill the screen. She was too genuine. Too believable. Too good. She made people love her, and that made her dangerous. Very dangerous indeed. He picked up an encrypted phone and made a call. "We have a problem," he said quietly. "The girl is becoming too popular. We need to move to Plan B, make it look like an accident. Something clean. Break failure, maybe. Do it within the week." He hung up and finished his drink. For 20 years he had protected his secret, eliminated every threat. This orphan girl wouldn't be any different. She was just another loose end that needed tying up. Outside his window, the city lights sparkled like false promises. Soon, he thought, everything would return to normal. The Sterling fortune would remain under his control, just as it had been since Amelia vanished. 4 days later, Alara was scheduled to visit a children's charity event across the city. A car was arranged, a professional driver assigned. Everything seemed normal as she climbed into the back seat and fastened her seatbelt. The driver was polite and quiet as they wound through city streets toward the mountains where the event was being held. The road grew steeper, with sharp curves and dangerous drops on one side protected only by thin guardrails. As they approached a particularly steep section, Alara noticed the driver suddenly tense. He pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. He pressed harder, then pumped it frantically. The car began to speed up instead of slow down. "The brakes," he shouted. "They're gone. Hold on." The car careened around curves at deadly speed. Alara gripped her seat, her heart thundering in her chest. They were headed straight for a hairpin turn with a 100-foot drop beyond it. At the last second, the driver yanked the wheel hard. The car spun sideways and slammed into the guardrail with a sickening crunch of metal. For one terrible moment, the vehicle tipped on 2 wheels, balanced on the edge of nothing. Then gravity pulled them back onto the road. They were alive. Emergency vehicles arrived within minutes. The driver was shaken but unhurt. Alara was helped out of the destroyed car, her legs barely able to hold her weight. Police investigators swarmed over the vehicle immediately. As Alara stood on the roadside, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes fell on something small and dark on the car's floor mat. She bent down carefully and picked it up. It was a cufflink, made of polished obsidian and engraved with a single letter, I. She had seen that cufflink before. She knew exactly who it belonged to. Isabella never went anywhere without her perfectly matched set. She wore them on her blazer sleeves every single day. Alara wrapped the cufflink carefully in a tissue and put it in her pocket. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From anger. Someone had tried to kill her. And now she knew exactly who. That evening, without telling Maxwell Sterling or security, Alara took a taxi to the Sterling Industries office building downtown. She rode the elevator to the executive floor and walked straight into Isabella's private office without knocking. Isabella looked up from her computer, startled. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead?" Alara finished, slamming the obsidian cufflink down on Isabella's desk. "Is that what you were going to say?" Isabella's face went white. She stared at the cufflink like it was a poisonous snake. "I don't know what you're talking about. The police found evidence that the brake lines on my car were deliberately cut. And I found this on the floor." Alara's voice was ice cold. "You left your signature at a crime scene, Isabella. Did you do it yourself, or did you hire someone?" Isabella's hands started shaking. For a long moment she said nothing, just stared at the evidence of her crime. Then, suddenly, she broke. Tears streamed down her perfect face as 20 years of bitterness poured out. "I did it," she sobbed. "I hired someone. I leaked your story to the press. I've hated you from the moment you walked through those doors with your innocent face and your kind heart, making me look like the villain. Why? Elara demanded. What did I ever do to you? You existed. Isabella screamed. You threatened everything. But I'm not the one you should be afraid of. It wasn't my plan. He told me what to do. He said it was the only way. Who? Elara's voice was deadly quiet. Who told you? Isabella looked up, her makeup running in black streams down her cheeks. Arthur Graves. The lawyer. He planned everything. He said you were a threat to the family, that you'd destroy everything. He gave me money. He told me exactly what to do. Elara's blood ran cold. Arthur Graves, the kind man who welcomed her home. The trusted family advisor who had worked for the Sterlings for decades. Why would he want her dead? She pulled out her phone and called Maxwell Sterling immediately. Uncle Maxwell, I need you to get into Arthur Graves' office. Now. Don't let him know. Check his computer files. Look for anything about my mother. Please. Sterling heard the fear in her voice and didn't ask questions. Within an hour, with the help of a private security team, they had breached Graves' encrypted files. What they found made Sterling physically sick. Decades of embezzlement. Millions of dollars funneled into offshore accounts. And buried in a folder labeled Amelia were medical documents, forged committal papers, and the address of a private psychiatric facility 300 miles away. Amelia Sterling hadn't disappeared. She had been erased. The truth assembled itself like pieces of a horrible puzzle. 20 years ago, Amelia had given birth to Elara while suffering from severe postpartum depression. Arthur Graves, who controlled the family's legal affairs, had used her vulnerable state to have her involuntarily committed to a remote sanatorium under a false name. With Amelia gone and presumed dead, Graves had slowly gained control of her shares of the Sterling fortune. He had been stealing from the family for 2 decades, hiding behind a mask of loyalty while draining their wealth. Elara's return threatened to expose everything. If they found Amelia, she could identify Graves as the man who had her locked away. The embezzlement would be discovered. His entire criminal empire would collapse. So he decided Elara had to die, just like he had tried to make Amelia disappear forever. A notification pinged on Graves' computer. Someone had accessed his private files. He sat frozen at his desk for one long moment, then calmly stood up. It was over. They knew. His only option now was his final contingency plan. He walked to his car and drove toward the Sterling mansion. On the way, he made one call. Bring the boy to the old estate. Yes, now. The game is over. I need one last bargaining chip. Elara's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Leo, unconscious in the back seat of a car, with a message, the old country estate where your mother grew up. Come alone. We have family business to finish. Maxwell Sterling tried to stop her. We'll call the police. The FBI. You can't go alone. He has Leo, Elara said quietly. And he's desperate. If I bring anyone, he'll know. He might hurt him. She touched her uncle's face gently. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. She drove alone to the abandoned Sterling country estate, a sprawling mansion that had been empty for 15 years. Ivy covered the walls, and broken windows stared out like dead eyes. Inside the dusty ballroom, Arthur Graves waited. He looked different now, his kind mask finally removed. Leo sat in a chair beside him, awake now but clearly drugged, his eyes unfocused. On the table between them lay a thick legal document. A confession, Graves said calmly. You admit to fraud. You renounce your claim to the Sterling name and fortune. Sign it, and the boy lives. Refuse, and he has the same accident his dear forgotten Aunt Amelia was supposed to have. Elara picked up the document and pretended to read it, her mind racing. She glanced around the room, looking for anything that might help. Then she remembered something Maxwell had told her days ago while showing her old photos. "You know," she said slowly, "my mother told me stories about this room. My uncle shared them with me. She said her father was paranoid about kidnappers. He installed a panic button behind a loose brick in that fireplace." She pointed casually. "Right there." It was a lie. She had no idea if a panic button existed. But she only needed Graves to look. Just for 1 second. Graves couldn't help himself. His eyes flicked toward the fireplace, searching for the brick she mentioned. It was an involuntary response, a micro-expression of concern. That single glance was all the hidden police snipers needed. They had been tracking Alara's phone, positioned silently outside every window. They saw Graves' attention shift away from Leo for just one moment. The ballroom's glass doors exploded inward. Armed officers swarmed in from every direction, shouting commands. Graves spun around, reaching for Leo, but he was too slow. Officers tackled Graves to the ground and snapped handcuffs on his wrists. Leo ran to Alara, throwing his arms around her waist. For the first time since his mother died, he spoke clearly, his voice small but strong, "You saved me." Alara held him tight, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me first," she whispered. "That night on the street. You trusted me." Graves was dragged to his feet, his silver hair disheveled, his expensive suit torn. He looked at Alara with pure hatred. "You're nothing," he spat. "Just a stupid maid who got lucky." Alara looked at him with sadness, not anger. "That's where you're wrong, Mr. Graves. Being a maid taught me something you never learned. It taught me that how you treat people when they can't do anything for you shows who you really are. You saw weakness and used it. I saw loneliness and healed it. That's the difference between us." As police led him away, Graves screamed about lawyers and lawsuits, but nobody was listening anymore. His power had been an illusion, built on lies. Now the truth had stripped it all away. Outside, Maxwell Sterling was waiting. When he saw Leo and Alara safe, he pulled them both into a fierce hug. 6 months later, the Sterling mansion had transformed. Where once there was cold silence, now there was warmth and laughter. The old estate where Graves had held Leo was demolished, and in its place, a beautiful new building rose. A shelter for at-risk children. They called it Amelia's house. At the opening ceremony, Alara stood at a podium wearing a simple blue dress. Beside her stood her uncle Maxwell, young Leo, and in a wheelchair, wrapped in a soft blanket, sat Amelia Sterling. They had found her exactly where Graves' files said she would be, locked away under a false name for 20 years. She was fragile and healing slowly, but she was home. "My family was given a second chance," Alara told the gathered crowd, her voice strong. "Now it's our turn to give that gift to others." After the speeches ended and the celebration began, Alara stepped outside into the cool evening air. At the entrance, she saw a teenage girl standing in the rain, soaked and shivering, staring at the shelter's warm lights but afraid to enter. Alara walked over with a soft blanket and a gentle smile. "It's cold out here. Why don't you come inside? There's hot food, warm beds, and people who care." The girl looked up, hope dawning in her frightened eyes. "Really? For someone like me?" "Especially for someone like you," Alara said softly. "I know exactly how it feels to stand on the outside looking in. But you don't have to anymore. None of us do. Come on. Let's go home." Together, they walked inside, where kindness proved once again that it was stronger than any fortune, and that love, not money, was the greatest inheritance anyone could leave behind. The end.